I think it's safe to say that we're all getting kinda sick of comic book movies. I mean, Endgame came out like 5 years ago, and we were getting sick of that shit even back then. But no matter how hard we try to stop it, each year Kevin Feige walks out on stage, stands out all smug in front of 100 movie titles, and tells us everything we need to dread for the next 5 years. And that's perhaps what makes Amazon's hit series The Boys so refreshing for its fans. Where the MCU is about heroism and turning green and Captain America's ass, The Boys is about making a mockery of these corporate superheroes. They take on racism, radicalization, nationalism, the Third Reich, hell, even religion, which you should never make fun of because, you know, you'll go to hell. Most importantly though, the show tackles capitalism and how it's got its grubby little fingers in all those pies. But truthfully, just between you and me though, I think there are some key flaws in the way the show critiques capitalism. And to be completely 100% real with you, I think the show actually reinforces capitalism. Before we go around saying that the show's like pro-capitalist or anti-capitalist or pro-Fortnite, anti-Minecraft, we really ought to take a look and see what the show is really trying to say. The show is notoriously satirical to the point where either, you know, conservatives or liberals will watch the show and think they're watching either side get totally owned. Like Homelander, he's clearly a stand-in for Donald Trump, right? You know, so we're making fun of Republicans. But then you got like the Girls Get It Done campaign, and then you're thinking, oh, okay, we're making fun of liberals, right? It's easy to see this like centrist South Park approach to politics and think that the show is completely non-political. Often things that brand themselves as not political are actually the most political. Like think of Nightly News or Dave Chappelle's awful stand-up. I don't think The Boys is trying to critique any political party exclusively. Instead, I think The Boys is driving its criticism to our good old friend or good old pal, capitalism. To explain, and you know, I guess for some context, all of the characters, all the superheroes in the show are managed by Vought International, which is like this mega evil super corporation, which is of course run by like Gustavo Fring. In the universe of The Boys, Vought has taken superheroes and turned them essentially into commodities. And since these superheroes are commodities, their goal is not actually fighting crime, dude. Their goal is the same as all commodities: to generate profit. The Seven isn't out fighting Thanos, you know, or hitting the gritty on Doctor Doom. This is the real world, and they need to get a bag. They need to generate value. And we see exactly how Vought's desire to generate value causes almost all of the conflict seen in The Boys. In season 1, we see Vought encourage terrorism in order to ramp up support for superhero action overseas. In season 2, they virtually ignore the fact that Stormfront is a literal fascist because it would affect the profits of the company. They routinely cover up sexual assaults. They assassinate people. They blackmail politicians. I mean, they do some insane stuff in the name of profit. There is so much more you could get out of this analysis, but the point is that The Boys is anti-capitalist. But then again, there's something kind of weird about the way The Boys critiques capitalism, something that has me thinking otherwise. In order to explain what I mean, let me introduce you to capitalist realism. In another Amazon original series, Fallout, we witness a society destroyed by nuclear Armageddon. Similar to The Boys, we learn throughout the show that most of the problems caused in the Fallout universe are caused by, you guessed it, capitalism. Ironically, despite literally bringing the world to its end, capitalism still thrives in the Fallout universe. Ask anyone who's played the games. I mean, half your time is spent selling stuff for bottle caps. And beyond that, Vault-Tec, the corporate corporation responsible for the whole nuclear Armageddon thing is revealed to be alive and thriving in the post-apocalypse. It actually reminds me of this quote that's often attributed to either Slavoj Žižek or Frederick Jameson. Quote, "It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism." I was introduced to this quote by Mark Fisher, who uses it in his work Capitalist Realism. He believes the quote perfectly describes a phenomenon he discovered of the same name, capitalist realism. Quote, "That slogan captures precisely what I mean by capitalist realism. The widespread sense that not only is capitalism the only viable political and economic system, but also that it is now impossible to even imagine a coherent alternative to it." Capitalist realism is basically the internalized belief that there is no alternative whatsoever to capitalism. You know, in the past, people literally fought wars on how society should be run. But nowadays, we seemingly all accept that there's only one way to run society, and it's capitalism. But if that's the case, then how does a show like The Boys combat capitalism? Is it truly possible to be anti-capitalist in a world where there seems to be no alternative? When it comes to fighting capitalism, the boys aren't occupying Wall Street or attending picket lines, okay, buddy? Their approach is more tough and badass, okay? They wear insane t-shirts and they don't take shit. But of course, this solution is a little bit flawed. I'm not saying what the boys do isn't freaking sick or whatever, but just, you know, hear me out. Imagine you actually wanted to strike a blow against capitalism, okay? How would you do it? And don't say bombs. Please don't say bombs. In the past, it's been through collective action. People either rioted, unionized, or even threw a whole ass revolution just to strike a blow against capitalism. Compare this to how The Boys tackles capitalism. Sure, they're technically a team, but they're hardly a collective. And most of their actions are primarily individual actions. For example, Huey and Butcher want to take down A-Train and Homelander respectively, not because of their contributions to the evils of capitalism, but because of personal vendettas. Well, surprise, surprise, this is actually just one of the ways capitalist realism reinforces itself. It turns inherently systemic issues into individual problems. Mark Fisher uses mental health as an example. In capitalism, mental health is seen as an individual problem. Think of like the doomer Wojak, all right? He's all alone, he's all depressed, and he's got nobody to blame but himself. But, I don't know, it also could be society that could be blamed for the doomer's awful, isolating life and terrible wage slave McDonald's job. It might not entirely be the doomer's fault. Quote, "Instead of treating it as incumbent on individuals to resolve their own psychological distress, we need to ask, how has it become acceptable that so many people, and especially so many young people, are ill? The mental health plague in capitalist societies would suggest that instead of being the only social system that works, capitalism is inherently dysfunctional, and that the cost of it appearing to work is very high. If mental illness wasn't seen as like an individual problem, it would instead be seen as a problem caused by capitalism. This realization would actually threaten the powers that be, because it would suggest that capitalism is not as ideal or natural as capitalist realism suggests. Well, The Boys, for being an anti-capitalist show, surprisingly promotes the opposite of this realization. Instead of encouraging collective action, it instead encourages us to see capitalism's corruption and evil, like mental illness, to be a problem best approached by the individual. And I don't know how many of you guys know this, but in real life, no matter how many ninja swords you have, nothing can stop capitalism from making Homelander take your wife away, okay? Individualism is useless. Capitalism is like the Thanos of The Boys, but instead of crawling up capitalism's ass and exploding like Ant-Man, The Boys just chooses to point and make fun of capitalism instead of addressing any sort of real, actual solution. Let's be real for a second though, we all know why the show doesn't have any genuine solutions. It's time we address the elephant in the room. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not just The Boys, it's Amazon Primetime Home Video plus original series The Boys. Now, a show making fun of evil CEOs being owned by an evil CEO seems like a bit of a conflict of interest. In Capitalist Realism, Mark Fisher goes on to describe Kurt Cobain's relationship with this exact type of conflict. Quote, Cobain knew that he was just another piece of the spectacle, that nothing runs better on MTV than a protest against MTV, knew that his every move was a cliche scripted in advance, knew that even realizing it is a cliche. The truth is, Capitalist Realism has the power to nullify any of its critiques by absorbing them and turning them into commodity. Think of like a Che Guevara t-shirt or the 18 millionth copy sold of a Rage Against the Machine album. The system absorbs its critiques, repackages them, and then just sells them back to the people expressing dissent. What happened to Cobain was exactly this. His music, while a poignant protest about the stresses of the era, just became another commodity that could be bought and sold. There could be no actual solutions to capitalism, just more Nirvana CDs and t-shirts. The Boys is trapped in the exact same prison. The show doesn't exist to dismantle or critique capitalism, but rather just to generate profit for Amazon. As a result, despite painting capitalism as the main villain of the show, The Boys is unable to present any sort of alternative or solution to their villains. Homelander may get defeated and Vought might get shut down, but I genuinely doubt that the system that enabled the both of them will face any sort of real consequence or solution. Capitalist realism demands that we cannot even see capitalism destroyed in fiction, nevertheless reality. So for as long as we refuse to acknowledge capitalist realism and its ever-growing presence, there will always be no alternative. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.